What are you doing? I don't know. What are you doing?
And then you're gonna have to restart.
It's interesting that the one we're talking about, they used to say something. Oh, yeah. It's used to say whatever. Or now it's just-
And then we have to go on Facebook. Okay. Okay, thanks. Sorry, Richard's not here tonight, so we gotta make sure.
Oh, okay. It is 7 o'clock, and so I'm calling this meeting of the Planning Commission on July 27th to order. And first of all, could we have a roll call?
Sure thing. Commissioner Orsi, Commissioner Scobie.
Here.
Vice Chair Jerkowski.
Here.
Chair Slothauer,
Here.
Commissioner Norman.
Here.
Commissioner Starbuck.
Here. Okay. Before we get going with the meeting, I don't know if everybody knows, but Ed Landucci has passed away. And we just, out of respect, we're leaving his chair open tonight. And we all respected him when he was a member and enjoyed working with him. And I don't have a lot to say, but I'm sorry he's gone. Okay.
Thank you.
We have consent agendas for the regular meeting on May 25th. I assume you all have read the minutes. And does anybody have any objections or corrections? No. With no objections, the approval of the minutes has passed. We also have a minutes for June 22nd. Again, are there any additions or corrections? Again, they stand approved. Now we do have one thing coming up. On April 27th, in the meeting, there was Norm asked a question and Dana replied to a different question.
Poor listening skills, I guess. Yeah, I'm asking to, if we can put a footnote in these minutes from April 27th. We were having a conversation about housing generally, but had sort of narrowed the conversation to accessory dwelling units. Commissioner Norman wondered to what extent the push for more ADUs was driven by the current governor's agenda. I had thought it was in regard to the larger housing conversation, and so I responded incorrectly. It is what I said though, so I feel like we can't actually change the minutes, but if we can just put a little footnote that I was completely wrong, that would be great.
And the correct answer.
Yeah, the correct answer would be that, I mean, it's still kind of correct in that none of it is driven by the governor's agenda, but my response about House Bill 2001 was related to the larger housing conversation. So if it's okay with you to make a footnote, we'd like to add that in there.
Are there any objections to adding that footnote?
No.
Then yes, we can.
Thank you. Should the footnote say Dana is an idiot? I'll come up with something nice about myself.
Just redline it.
Yeah, there you go. Just cross out the whole thing altogether.
Okay.
Thank you.
Comments. Now we are getting to comments from the public to any item not on the agenda. If you have something you'd like to bring up, you can have up to 3 minutes. And if you want to speak, go up to the microphone and the podium there in the middle, give your full name, your address, and then you have your 3 minutes.
And just a correction, because we learned something new. You don't have to say your address. You just have to say like what your relation to Bandon is. So if you live here or work here or don't live here, you don't have to say your address anymore.
When did that change?
June went to a city recorder training and learned that. So we've just been operating by old rules for quite some time.
Okay. All right, you say your name and how you.
I don't know how to phrase it. Yeah, like whether you live in Bandon or not.
Whatever. Say what you wish, just don't make it too long. All right, all right, anybody like to speak? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Robert McLernan and we live here in Bandon part-time. What I had wanted to comment was what I've seen you guys, thank you, posting on Facebook, some of the renderings for the new hotel and stuff. I would hope that a couple of things are considered. Number one, I love Bandon, been coming here for a lot of years and I don't know that the latest rendering looks like what Bandon should look like. I hope you guys consider that. Along with, you know, the parking down there for the business people and to get patrons and stuff. I don't know, it's been addressed real well. 85 units and 45 spaces, it's pretty simple math. It sure doesn't cover where all the employees that are going to be supporting that new business are going to park, along with the patrons, which all will be driving here from somewheres to use the place. And ask what the commission is kind of have what ideas they are to help with the labor pool here, because one of the things, as well as you guys must see, I know my comment is all these places are looking for help. And there's not anybody addressed what's going to be going on, how to get more skilled labor here for all the trades. Every place you go, restaurants, hotels, all of them in the little magazines are looking for help like crazy. And I don't know where this fits into the thing, but you know, I think Bandon needs to do a little better job at trying to figure out how to get workers here. My comment is that I went to a garage sale a couple weekends ago and the gal was leaving town to go to Roseburg. And I said, why are you leaving? It's such a great place. She says, well, I got 2 kids, can't find a place to take care of them. And you know, the pay is good here, but I can't pay for help for childcare and get out of town and work here. So I'm leaving and leave. So, and also as a little footnote, I always got a kick out of how you guys came up with the solution to the electric rates to charge 10% extra for the people that don't live within the city limits. So how's that working? So,
That's that we're not the people that need to address that.
okay. And I also would like to get some comments on where they've taken up the ball field area going southbound there. I noticed they cleaned all that up here lately. Maybe some insight on what's going on there and what you guys expect to see in the future and the crystal ball you guys all have. So
10 seconds.
Again, that is something to take up with the planning commission.
Actually, the Public Works Department, because we don't, if it's a baseball field thing, it's probably more of a public
Oh, okay.
works
no,
issue.
the property south of the baseball fields, that all that acreage there
Oh, by the school. Is that what you're talking about?
from the Circle Park going southbound. All that area has been cleared there. There's been some mention that's been bought by the
Gravel point.
by the guy that
By the baseball fields. Well, you can come talk to the planning department and we'll figure out what it is you're thinking of, and I'm sure we can get you an answer about what's going on there.
Okay, are there any other comments? Okay. So now I need my paper here. We're going to have a public hearing on it's open at 9 after 7 on July 27th before the Planning Commission of the City of Bandon. And it is an amendment to Title 17 of the Bandon Municipal Code to reduce minimum lot size requirements for dwellings in the R2 zone, allow for up to 4 residential units on property over 10 acres in the light industrial zone, and amend the accessory dwelling unit standards. The criteria related to this action are listed in the staff report available online through the city's website and as part of tonight's meeting agenda. Please address your comments to these criteria or the criteria you believe apply to this decision. Like I said, there's really no site visits here.
No, you see, I think you skip over it if it's legislative, right? The stuff that's in
Yeah.
the box. You
Right.
just go to the next one.
So what does the staff have to report?
Thanks. So we've been talking about making some changes to our housing code for a while. I didn't bore you with another PowerPoint because I think you've seen it so many times. But after our many discussions, what we decided to do is sort of distill it down into a code that we could pass pretty quickly because we felt pretty confident in these changes. Those changes included modifications to the supplemental provisions chapter regarding accessory uses. So I did a little bit of moving around here with the language, but essentially what we would allow are attached and detached accessory dwellings shall not exceed 900 square feet of floor area or 60% of the primary dwelling's floor area, whichever is smaller. Then the other addition was to remove the requirement for architectural features of the underlying zone. I'll stop there. Are there any questions on the accessory dwelling unit changes?
I think we were pretty clear on those.
Okay. And then the second one was the R2 zone, that we would amend the lot size requirements to make it a little bit easier to build multifamily housing in an R2 zone, which is supposed to be just slightly more dense than an R1. So instead of 9,000 square feet for a duplex, we would only require 7,500 square feet. Instead of for a 3-family, instead of 10,000, we would 10,500, we would require 9,000, but we kept the same. You'd have to have another 1,000 square feet for each additional unit. And then finally adding in the light industrial zone, an allowance for up to 4 residential units on sites over 10 acres, and that's specific to a parcel that's in the light industrial zone that constructed 4 units, which are not currently permitted. So that's to bring those into the community as housing. Do you have any questions?
So that's a lot of, sounds like a lot of changes. So my question would be, all of this information in terms of your proposals that's on the website, correct?
That's correct.
And do you have an idea how long it's been there?
20 days,
20
I
days?
think is the requirement. I'd have to look in our code. It's dated though on there.
Okay.
Yes.
Does anybody have any comments on, have any of the commissioners, any objections or comments? Okay, well, let's move into public comment. Does anybody in the audience or online have anything to say about these? Come on up.
My name's Bill Beck. I live and work in the city of Bandon. I just have a few comments about the ADUs, and I don't mean to be harsh. It's just sort of maybe I went back and read what I wrote and it sounded a little harsh, but I don't mean it to be harsh. But anyways, I think it's a good idea. I think we need to increase the size of the ADUs to 800 square feet. But I feel like 60% is still not enough. 60% of the primary house. I think that really sort of punishes people with small houses. You know, if you have for example, if you have an 846 square foot house, you can only build a 507 square foot ADU, or a 1,334 square foot primary dwelling, you can only build an 800 square foot ADU. So I don't know, I would tend to bump it up to 80% or just get rid of the percentage thing and just give everyone 800 square foot. Number 2, I don't feel we should be allowing more than one ADU at this time. When the state mandated it, that doubled our housing potential by 100%. And I don't think we're maybe even close to 5% of the capacity of ADUs. You know, so we still have a long ways to go, and I just feel we should sort of fill that out before we get ahead of ourselves. Along with the allowing an ADU with a duplex, I feel this will just open the door for developers to buy our older homes, tear them down, build a duplex along with the ADU or two. And I really feel they're just here for profit and not for the cause. And we'll build as cheaply as possible. And I really think this could ultimately backfire and push the cost of
30 seconds.
single family detached homes further away from the first time builders or buyers, I should say. Because the developer will bid against them and have profit in mind. I think it will definitely increase the value of our housing, which we don't want to, because we're trying to create housing for workforce. So, and I think it's a good idea
Close up.
to remove the separate water meter requirement. Thank you.
Pardon?
Could I respond to that very quickly?
I was going to, but you
Oh,
can't.
no, go for
No,
it.
you know more than I do.
Oh,
Go
no,
ahead.
I was just gonna say that since our last discussion, we actually, they opted to not include the allowance of a accessory dwelling unit with a, a second accessory dwelling unit or with a duplex. We just kind of trimmed this one.
Okay.
And the city council was able to pass a requirement getting rid of the separate metering requirement. Because
So
it
that's all
wasn't-
done.
That was done at the last city council meeting because they found that it wasn't part of the actual land use code, that it was more utility related. So they could make that decision without the planning commission
All right.
putting it in their ordinance.
Well, the other thing is that if on the proposal that we have, it's 900 square feet, not 800.
I think you have the one from our last
Okay.
discussion.
All right. So we're great. We're up to 900. But I still think the percentage thing is a little punishes smaller homes. Because like I have and I'm not interested in building an ADU, but I have a beautiful sized lot and a respectful, nice little home. And I can't build a decent size ADU. And I know originally when we first started, I think it was one of my comments that I said, I don't think ADUs should compete in size with the main house. But on a smaller house, I think it's okay. I think there's some kind of a cutoff somewhere we should create. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So,
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments? All right.
Anyone on Zoom? We do have quite a few people on Zoom.
I don't see any hands being raised on Zoom.
I think I'd like to make a comment, which is, we all know, everybody that lives here in this community, that we have a housing problem, and particularly for what we're calling workforce housing. And it is true, developers can come in here and buy a property, level a house, and build all kinds of stuff. But it's like a risk that I think the city of Bannon has to take. And so, and I think that the city is trying to do that incrementally. I think this is a pretty big jump, actually, from where we are. So that's my opinion. Appreciate your opinion.
have more, but I ran out of time.
Maybe we could get you a second,
Well, I forgot to ask if any of the commissioners had any questions for you while you were up here. No?
Can I ask him?
Yeah, would you come back up for a second? Sally would like to ask you a question.
So you were talking about the second dwelling, if you were to have an ADU and were you looking for something equal size to what the original dwelling is? Is that what you were proposing?
No. Um.
Well, you threw out 80%.
Yeah, 80%, yeah. You know. At 60%. That's, I think, where we're at now.
Right now, the code is 40%.
40%,
So they're
we're
proposing to
asking for
change it to
60.
60. Yeah.
And if we move to 60. Any house up to 1,334 square feet gets punished. And once you hit 1,334, that's when you can finally have a 800 square foot home.
And we're proposing 900, so you.
Or
have
9,
another-
now I have to redo my
Yeah.
math a little bit, but I hope you get what I'm trying to say. And
So you're wanting it to be comparable to the size that anyone else would be allowed to build.
yeah, it should just be flat. Everyone can build a 900 square foot ADU.
Mhm.
No matter if you have a 3,000 square foot home or 800 square foot primary residence. I know that might be odd that you'd have a bigger ADU than your house, but it really making you build a 500 square foot ADU just because you have an 800 square foot primary residence doesn't make a bunch of sense.
It doesn't.
Other than the scale, which I sort of appreciate, but now I'm starting to get away from that.
Well, the goal is to house people
Yes,
and families.
yes. So building a 500 square foot ADU isn't going to do that. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, does the staff have any comments?
I would just, for those who are in the audience and maybe didn't hear a lot of the work session conversation, we did have a nice meeting where we talked a lot about how big or how small one of these could or should be. And I want to say that the Planning Commission, through a lot of effort, came to these numbers in agreement. So it's not to say too that the city council can't amend these later, but I also want to ask you in your discussion to maybe go back to that conversation and remember why you came to these. Because I think we did at some point throw out 1,000 square feet and 75% of the primary dwellings floor area. So you could take that comment from Bill into consideration and see if there might be a larger floor area or a larger percentage that might be appropriate.
I wouldn't argue with the larger one.
No, and
Not to throw a wrench in it,
Well, you
My-
already know my feeling.
my comments even back then were that the percentage is kind of I don't think it's a silly number. I like 900 square feet. Actually, I was pushing for 850 and we went to 900, which is fine with me.
And you know where I stand.
Yeah. But for all of I would not object at all to going up to 75%. Because like you said, if you've got a nice small home, then why should you, again, smaller, but still you could build a home that a family could live in.
I've seen equal size houses on lots and where I used to live. And personally, maybe because I always saw them, I didn't see any problem with them. I didn't see any issue.
I'd personally like to see something a little smaller.
But I'm just saying, I've
That's
seen them,
yours,
yeah, I'm
yes.
just saying, I've seen them be equal size and not seen any problem with it. I'm not suggesting that we have to have them equal size. I'm just saying, I've seen them up to equal size and it's still
Okay,
satisfied.
any commissioners like to roll in on this?
Well, I appreciate the attempt, Dana, to relitigate this yet again for the fourth time.
Shameless.
I'm very comfortable with 900 square feet, which is larger than I initially wanted. And I'm also comfortable with 60%. So that the housing doesn't overwhelm the lot. That's my thinking.
Don?
Yeah, I think that we're probably, these numbers are probably pretty good right now. I think we're still in a trial and error scenario. And we need to see how it's going to work out. And if it comes to the point that it's not adequate enough, then we can change it later. But we're still trying to get a feel of how these ADUs work.
I figured it out one time, but what is 900 square feet? What would the house size be to get a 900 square foot house?
Yeah.
I was just trying to do that.
They said that
1,500, the audience, thank you.
it would be what?
Yeah.
1,500 square feet.
Makes sense.
Okay.
1,500 square feet gets you that.
That really covers most of the housing
It does.
in Bandon. And besides, if we do this again incrementally, it keeps all of those profiteering developers from coming in here and taking over, Just kidding.
I'm just concerned that if they're too small, that you're not going to be satisfying the need in the first place. The need is workforce
Right.
housing for families, nurses with children, possibly teachers with children, other people with children, because it's not easy to have a commute from Coos Bay or Coquille or Langlois if you have children also.
Although my feeling is that 900 square feet is plenty for a small family. It's,
I guess it depends on the age of the people and the size of the bodies. Sorry, I have a 6'6" son. If he had,
Well-
I'm serious, some people need a queen size bed. Some people need the space. They just do.
I mean, again, I've mentioned this before, but I lived with a wife and 2 kids for a couple of years in a 650 square foot place.
I know you said that.
And
I couldn't do that, but I know you.
it was crowded, but it wasn't horrible.
I still think it does depend on the age and the size of the people.
Yeah, they were younger.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyway,
Yeah, they have opinions.
I like the 900 square feet. I think I'm with Don on this is. Let's see how this works and if there's a problem on the percentage. There's a problem on the percentage. We'll find that out and we can make adjustments later on.
Catherine?
I'd love to see the percentage increased. I really think there's not going to be an issue. We're not seeing a lot of them being built, and if they're 75 or 80% versus 60, I don't think you're going to notice driving by. So I'm with the group that would like to see bigger ADUs and
Can you speak into your microphone?
yeah, I would like to see family workforce housing.
So bigger,
Yes.
okay? Would somebody, are we up for a motion now?
I think you can be if there's no discussion about changing the R2 lot size and amending the light industrial zone.
Does anybody have any comments on the other two? I mean, we discussed those again. We beat them to death.
I just wanted to make sure before you make a motion, but yeah, you would just move to recommend to the city council approval of the attached amendment.
Right. Somebody want to make a motion?
So-
Well, actually, Catherine, if you want to make a motion,
Make a comment.
who? You come up to the front.
I've lived in Robert McLernan again. I've lived in quite a few places in California where they have these ADUs, been on a little more down the road. The only thing I would ask you guys to look at is the lot size, because if the whole lot becomes house and ADU, it turns into a piece of property where if you do have that family you want to bring here with the kids, they don't have a place to play. It becomes a burden for the street and a burden, everybody likes to go to the park. I know that, but moms with their kids like to have a place for their kids to be safe on their own lot. So maybe condition it somewhat with the lot size too.
Okay, thank you.
I can respond to that very quickly, just because we talked about this in
Yeah.
our work session as well. We did a couple examples where we put a house and accessory dwelling unit on a pretend lot in town. Because we looked at adjusting the lot size requirement, or the amount of the lot that you could take up. Right now, we allow up to 50% to be taken up with structures. And because of the way our setbacks are, that you need 20 in the front, 10 in the back, and a minimum of 5 on the side, that equals 13. That just ends up taking up so much of the lot that increasing that 50% to any additional number doesn't make a huge difference. So you're sort of saved by the setbacks in that regard. If that makes sense. So like it didn't take up, it can never take up more than 50% of the lot. They didn't go towards amending that because it felt like we'd have to change the setbacks then. If that helps.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Okay, do I have a motion or more comments or?
I wonder, since Dana, you opened the door to throw out all kinds of new numbers. If we need to have you read what your current proposal is again.
Sure.
It's, okay,
Would that be helpful? So the current proposal was to allow attached and detached accessory dwellings not exceed 900 square feet of floor area or 60% of the primary dwelling's floor area, whichever is smaller, which changed from not exceed 650 square feet or 40% of the primary dwelling. So we're just increasing those two numbers there.
Thank you.
Yes, of course.
So I'll make a proposal. So I move to recommend to the city council approval of the attached amendment to Title 17 of the Bandon Municipal Code as proposed without amendment.
Second,
I think Don seconded it.
He did.
okay.
didn't I say it loud enough?
I don't know.
No,
Second.
I didn't
Just
hear
heard
it.
your voice.
Would you like me to do a roll call vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. Commissioner Orsi,
Yes.
Commissioner Scobie,
Yes.
Vice Chair Jerkowski,
No.
Chair Slothauer,
Yes,
Commissioner Norman,
Yes.
Commissioner Starbuck.
Yes,
Thank you. Okay. So it'll go to the city council in September, I believe, for those of you in the audience. Yes, the city council meeting, September 11th, 2023 at 7 PM.
okay. Now we are going to have the public hearing on that is now closed. Now how is that, huh?
Nice.
And we're gonna discuss, Bill, did you want to talk more about the ADU amnesty program, or are you done?
I'm done. Oh, that sounds great.
Well, I think the idea was if people were here to talk about housing, that if it was okay with everyone, we would switch the heavy industrial with the ADU amnesty because it's real quick and then
But
you
if-
can hear about that too.
If we don't, we can just continue on with the agenda. Okay, so let's get into a discussion here of unit 6.1. Heavy industrial legislative amendment.
Okay.
What do you have to say, Dana?
All right, so we have also met in a prior work session. We met in a couple. We were approached by an entity that owns a property on the Coquille River. They're interested in having aquaculture on the site. What we learned at our previous meetings was that the zoning of the property never actually changed from heavy industrial. But it did change on our map somehow to CD1. We figured that part out. There was then this proposal to change the heavy industrial zone to allow aquaculture. However, it also requires that we update our comprehensive plan because the comp plan specifically called out this property as a potentially a controlled development property that did not allow aquaculture. Sort of just a funny planning mess and nightmare. That Sherry McGrath, a local planning consultant, assisted me in sort of unraveling the string there. She is also working for the Port of Bandon and has put together a proposal for an amendment to the heavy industrial zone. There are two here for you tonight to talk about. So one would be to just allow outright permitted aquaculture, mariculture, and other similar uses. She did highlight there along with their accessory uses, meaning that we wouldn't need to call out any of those specific accessories to aquaculture and mariculture in the code. And then there is another option in here for you. that would allow outright permitted aquaculture, mariculture, and other similar uses, uses that are accessory to the permitted use. And then also a couple conditional uses, which would be freight terminals, including loading dock, storage, warehousing, wholesale distribution, and cold storage, microgeneration, wind, solar, geothermal energy, permitted uses in the light industrial zone. And then included some changes that we'd have to make in the shoreland overlay because it specifically calls out that property as controlled development. So there are a few changes in there as well. She also submitted some changes to the comprehensive plan that I did not bring to you tonight because I didn't feel like it was work session ready. This is probably more what we need to figure out before we massage the comprehensive plan. And then there's also a request to define what aquaculture and mariculture means. So we can talk about that in the future as well. But the first thing that I wanted to sort of pick your brains about is to what extent do you want to allow this? And to what extent do you want to change the heavy industrial zone? I think I talked a little bit at a previous meeting about the potential for doing not necessarily as outright permitted, but having it be a type 2 decision, which means that we notice the neighbors and it's a staff decision, but there's an opportunity to appeal to the planning commission rather than just outright permitted. And you can put some parameters on it if there are concerns that you have. So we did visit the Port of Bandon's current aquaculture, mariculture facility that they have. We learned a lot of things. We asked some questions about, are there, is there freight involved? Are there smells involved? Are there things that would come up maybe in a conditional use permit process that we would want to include in our code? And so those were things after we've had all of these discussions and learned as much as we have. I wanted to bring it to you to get some feedback about how you'd like this to look. And this is just the initial conversation. Any thoughts?
So as I understand it currently, I'm perfectly fine with changing the heavy industrial to include mariculture and aquaculture. I do have concerns about what's lying in the weeds, though. One of the concerns I have just has to do with terminals, and you address some of this by basically saying that the street where required would be widened. I wasn't able to attend the tour, so I don't know what was discussed specific to protecting water quality. When we're talking about wind power, solar power, and all kinds of other elements, which I think are in the second proposal. I would want more information about that. And any project would still require a conditional use permit, correct? Even if it was permitted or not?
Well, no, so if you put it under permitted uses, then it doesn't require a public hearing before the planning commission. It becomes a type 1 decision, which is why I said you might want to put some parameters around it, either as a type 2. You could do it as a type 3 conditional use permit. But I feel like you might want to instead set more clear boundaries now as part of this discussion, rather than leaving it open to our sort of more general conditional use chapter. You can certainly have it as a type 3, but I think probably it's a little bit more straightforward than that. I could be wrong because there just aren't many sites that would allow for it, or different sort of scenarios under which the conditions may or may not be right for the use to exist. It probably only applies to that one property.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that caught my attention was this is in the shoreline overlay matrix.
Mm-hmm.
And it's on the second page. Basically, it talks about that fill's permitted. Fill catches my attention. Particularly given that the property we're thinking about is on the water. So what does fill mean? And how much of it? And where does it go?
I think it's a good question, and it's something that we'll probably have to talk about sooner rather than later, especially in areas affected by the floodplain. From what I understand, without going into too much boring detail, there's going to be some changes to the floodplain regulations in the state of Oregon in the next couple of years that would disallow any new net impact, which would include fill in the floodplain. So I would say fill can include all sorts of different things. We have, so I think fill one could be when you do development, you are elevating the property in some way, grading it, bringing in outside material to shape it in a certain way. Sometimes people try to lift it out of the floodplain or do something like that. That's primarily what we deal with. The Public Works Department deals with fill and grade permits. So anytime there is a proposal to bring in any amount of fill, they require that you list what you are bringing in and taking out and provide a grading plan. Fill also comes into play when we talk about wetlands or riparian areas and what you can and can't do. And that's when you get a state permit for if you're bringing in any sort of fill there. So I'm not sure if those are as relevant. I would guess that fill in this scenario is more related to a development fill. But if you're doing a development there, you can or cannot bring in fill, or the type of fill you're bringing in maybe dependent. And I believe in our shoreland overlay, in the actual code itself, it does discuss fill, and in our comprehensive plan. So there are certain, if you're intending to do that, there are certain findings you need to make in order to prove that you can or can't bring fill in. If that's helpful. That's my very novice understanding of it.
Got it.
Was that at all helpful?
Yes.
Okay.
However, I wouldn't want something like that to just be permitted, just assuming that it's going to be fine.
True. I think I will note that.
And the other thing too, that I get concerned about, particularly with the coastal communities, is, we've mentioned once or twice, I think, the whole issue of climate change and sea level rise, but it doesn't really seem like, nobody really knows what to do, I think, because there's no menu in terms, well, it's going to go up, 3 inches this year and 4 the next, so nobody really knows. But it seems to me that if one is proposing some sort of development in close proximity to the water, then that needs to be something that's thought about. If it's anticipated that the development's is supposed to last for 25 years, well, maybe it will, maybe it won't. And I think that that's significant, specific to the city, because if the sea level does rise sufficiently in order to damage developments, then one wonders about what the city's liability is in terms of making repairs to those places, et cetera. That's kind of where I go.
Sure. I think it's totally valid. And if I remember correctly, the C2 zone doesn't allow you to bring in fill. That would be the jetty area, or very little. And I think it's probably for that reason that there was some thought about what the jetty is composed of and what happens when you bring fill in. And I think we'll be having this conversation in a lot more depth when we do start getting into floodplain regulation change. As I learn more, I will share more with you. But yeah, they're essentially regulating the amount of fill that you can bring in the floodplain. One, because it's affecting essential salmon habitat. But 2, I think there's climate change worries or concerns about changing, especially coastal and riparian areas. So I'm glad you're interested in it, and we should definitely talk about it coming up soon. I'll put it on my list.
And the other thing you brought up was water quality.
Yeah.
And we discussed that on our tour. And apparently there's not much change in the water quality between very little temperature change and the pollutants. The way they have it set up, they were kind of eaten up. The
Eaten up by the friendly little bacteria?
oh no.
Oh, okay.
The waste from the seaweed went through sea urchins who ate the residue from the seaweed. And it's kind of a closed circuit that cleans it up pretty well. Did I get that right?
Yeah, and I meant to respond to that as well, that I think we can get you some notes and include that in whenever we make a decision on
Right.
this, include those notes in there, everything that we gained from that site visit. But yeah, for those who weren't there, I know Richard recorded the conversation, so we can get some minutes.
I was pretty impressed with that.
Mhm.
Because that, one of the first questions I asked was water quality.
Right.
So,
Sorry, I missed that, but
yeah, I think you would have enjoyed it.
I think Jeff could do a follow-up tour for you if he
Yeah, I think
asked
he could.
nicely.
how nice would I have to be?
Probably not too nice. I'll see what I can do.
Jeff or,
I'll put in a good word.
Jeff or Josh.
Yeah, yeah. It was very helpful.
Yeah, it was a good tour. Anybody else?
I think they also said something about there's government protection of the water too, so it's not,
Right.
I mean, they have to be within. They have to do what the law says, so
Yeah, they
they
test.
follow the law for the water quality.
Okay,
I think something else you might consider is transportation. You brought that up briefly, that you might have some sort of limitation on use regarding transportation. I'm thinking about trucking, and it doesn't seem like they're at least at the one that the port was doing, there's not an immense amount of trucking that's happening. But on a site that's much, much larger, you never know. So that may be something that you'd want to require findings about. And then, require a trucking route be posted or something. Riverside, if we're thinking about this particular lot, Riverside's really narrow and would be impossible to, I think, navigate a truck on, so. Might consider that. So I have fill and transportation. Were there other things that might be considered limitations on use that you'd want us to review as part of a decision?
Well, the trucking would sort of be limited by the bridge over Ferry Creek too. They'd have to come in from the other end.
Oh, that's a good point.
Or up Caroline.
Yeah, good point. Also Sherry McGrath is here who wrote all of these. So if you wanted to invite her to speak, or if you have any questions for her, I think that would be appropriate too. It's up to you.
My only questions had to do with definitions, and you said we'd discuss that later, like the definition of aquaculture.
Yeah, I mean, Sherry could talk to that. We spoke on the phone today about it. So if you want to hear.
Different in the comprehensive plan.
Yes, and so the proposal would be to create a new definition of aquaculture and mariculture.
Do you have a proposed new definition?
Sherry did include, I didn't put it in this because I thought we would talk more about, I was wrong. I didn't realize you'd be interested in the definition. So we can include that for next time. We can continue to talk about this until we're ready for a hearing if you'd like. Just kind of keep it as a regular agenda item until we get
I
there.
think we need to continue it.
Okay.
I would love to see it move forward to a hearing. I think this is a really exciting project. I think we could talk about the definition in a public hearing. I would love to see it move forward.
Me too.
Me too.
Okay, you trust me to write it up?
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow, that was lots of confidence. Sure. Yes. Okay, we can, if,
No, we all look here and go, she knows more than we do.
oh no, you guys are, you know everything. I love it. I will put something together and we can get it scheduled for a public hearing. And then if we have to have more than one public hearing to talk it out, I think that you all are capable of making that decision.
Good idea.
Okay.
That's great.
Okay, let's move on to the ADU amnesty program.
All right. So this was something that we brought to the city council meeting last month. In, making all of these changes to our accessory dwelling unit code, making it easier for people to build an accessory dwelling unit. We also wanted to consider all the people who may have built things that were not legal prior to 2019, or had spaces that could that are being used as pseudo accessory dwelling units. There are things that we see come up on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace and from people coming in to talk to us in the office. It's just always a real bummer when I have to say the apartment or the house that you bought and the apartment you think you have are unpermitted. And I don't want to shut down any housing in town when we absolutely need housing. But also it wouldn't be fair if we didn't treat everyone the same way. When we know a code violation is occurring, we take action. So we propose to the city council a sort of path for people to come into compliance. So if we know about it, we can let them know, hey, you have an illegal accessory dwelling unit, but we're gonna bring you into the fold. So we had a couple of suggestions for what the program might look like. And we said you could limit amnesty to properties or units developed prior to 2019, which was when the ADU ordinance was established. So if anyone has built a house in 2020 and added an illegal accessory dwelling unit, well, sorry, you're gonna have to do it to our current code. I'm thinking about things that were built quite some time ago. We would still require payment of system development charges because the impact is still there. That hasn't changed. So that would be $5,500. But we would waive permit fees, including any of the after the fact fees that we would charge for someone not getting a permit, because that's trying to ask them to please come into compliance. And we would allow the unit to be approved as is, even if it exceeds our current maximum. And again, these would be only units built prior to 2019. We would also require that they get approval from Coos County Building Departments. We're not just allowing unpermitted or unsafe structures. So the city council was interested. I wanted to bring it to you guys to see if you had any ideas before we bring it back to them. And what you thought.
The item that caught my attention was the SDCs. Or SDC, excuse me. So we have a non-permitted ADU somewhere. And by virtue of the city accepting a system development charge in the sum of $5,500, that also is saying that you need to upgrade this ADU in order to have it permitted, correct?
So the only thing that they would have to update or fix is if there were any building code violations. So they'd have to get permits through the building department to make sure that it was livable. So we would make them hand in a zoning compliance application to us, just showing what it looks like inside of the home and outside of the home. But we would, if it met, setback requirements, but maybe didn't meet the interior size. Because those are most of the ones that we're looking at are accessory dwelling units that were kind of carved out in a house or above a garage or something like that. They might be bigger than 650 square feet or 900 because they were sort of built way long ago. So that would be the allowance we would make, but they would still have to have building permits.
So they'd be paying the SDC. And at the end of the day, they would still have a non-permitted ADU?
No, we would permit it. So we make folks pay the system development charge after we've approved their zoning compliance. So they would get that and then take that to the building department to get their building permit, and then they would be legal.
Because you got to make sure it's, they could get a certificate of occupancy.
Right,
It's got to be a decent place.
right.
I've seen some in some places where, they maybe just kick the chickens out and people are living in there. And not a good situation. So what you're saying is still got to be a good house, a decent place.
Mm-hmm.
And they got to pay a fee and then they can get a permit, but they have to get
Yes.
a building department
Approval.
with and would the city give them a COO?
I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah, I suppose we would. We usually do give accessory dwelling units a CFO. So we'd probably go out there with the building department and just make sure it all looks good. But the only thing that we would be looking for is to make sure it wasn't, tacked on and didn't meet setback requirements. If it's an illegal structure, let's say, we couldn't permit that sort of thing.
And would the county do something else on top of that? Or you would not anticipate the county would care?
Well, the county handles building permits right now. So the county, that would be the one thing they would care about. They don't have zoning requirements that are in place inside city limits. So I have not talked to the county building department yet, though, about how they would go about doing that. I just assume that they have a path forward for us if we demand it. But I'll find out and see what they think about it.
I have a silly question in regards to limiting it to the properties or units developed prior to 2019. Wouldn't there be some after 2019 or now? And what would you do with those?
Well, so we passed, prior to 2019, we didn't allow accessory dwelling units at
Right.
all. So I think there were probably some that were constructed without permits prior to then, but I'm saying, once we had an ordinance in place where they had the opportunity to do it correctly. Like if you built your house after 2019 and you have an illegal unit, then I would say you have to come into compliance with our current code.
Okay,
Yeah, that wouldn't
I
be.
just wasn't sure what you were doing with those,
Hmm.
because there might be some.
Mhm. I mean, I think our plan is to require anyone who had the opportunity to do it right,
Mhm.
to make them do it right. This is an opportunity for people who didn't have
Prior to
the
the-
opportunity, yeah,
Thank you.
before we even had accessory dwelling units on our minds.
Right, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay. Any more discussion? Anybody?
I just want to make sure that no one is like completely against this program. There's no one hates it. Okay,
No.
great.
Okay, we'll move on to the staff update. The planning department, do you have a report for us?
I do, it's in your packet. I think some things to note, that I think are really interesting, Kristen and I were talking about this today, last year we had 60 new single-family detached dwellings, constructed. This year we've got applications for 6. So it has just been a total change in our department. But where we lack in any form of new single-family residential housing, we're still seeing a lot more, commercial development, or requests for commercial development. So we've been busy on a subdivision application, Bandon Coastal Subdivision, the High Dock Building. There's a 4-plex on June, the Marriott project that someone brought up earlier, and we did also receive an application for Gravel Point, which is a resort on Beach Loop Drive. That one will come before the Planning Commission as a CUP. But ultimately, all those projects have to go through their completeness review first before they make it here. So when you hear things asking, when are you going to hear this? It's only after they've been deemed complete and then they get scheduled for a public hearing. And all of that information can be found on the city's website, on the planning department page under land use decisions. Just throwing that one out there. The other thing to point out is that we're working on a downtown streetscape plan. So we hired some landscape architects to look at Old Town. And tried to envision it with a little bit more life. So they're looking at landscaping, but they're also looking at like benches and where can we make more public gathering spaces. They have ideas about expanding sidewalks and rearranging some parking. And for those of you concerned about that statement, they were actually looking at making more parking, which is pretty cool, reconfiguring streets to sort of fit in more. And we have our first open house scheduled for August 22nd. So if you want to hear about that meeting, I always suggest people sign up on the website for the updates, the city newsletters and notices. We always send out updates on that subscriber list about things like that.
You have a time on that meeting yet, Dana?
I want to say it's from 4 to 6 and at the library, but we're still confirming the actual location.
Thank you.
Yes,
I'm sorry, what date did you say that?
August 22nd.
Thank you.
We're also I don't know if I put this on here, but we're still in the middle of working on our transportation system plan. We are scheduling an open house on that one for October. We'll let you know as the date gets closer, but certainly that's something I'm sure all of you would want to attend and provide input on. I'm going to apply for another grant to wrap up our housing needs analysis and buildable lands inventory. We didn't get to finish that project as much as we wanted to. During the last go round, we received some technical assistance from DLCD. We will be applying for additional grant funding to do the code implementation and public outreach process. So keep your fingers crossed for me. And then also with DLCD, we received funding to look at our beaches and dunes policy. So once we wrap up public access, which is coming to you next month, now I don't remember, next month, then we'll start on the beaches and dunes project. Do you have any questions for me?
Anybody?
Can you speak to the concern that was brought up about the parking at the Marriott?
Well, we really can't talk about it because it's scheduled for a public hearing, so we wouldn't be able to talk about it outside of that public hearing. So once the application is deemed complete, it was deemed incomplete. There's a lot more work that would need to be done before we can bring it to you guys.
Okay,
I think generally the concern though, is, if I heard it correctly, is our code requires 1 space per 2 guest rooms. But we really can't talk about it outside of a public hearing.
okay.
Any other questions?
Okay, that's your report.
Okay. The other one is that I just wanted to let you know that one of your decisions from last month, 23038, that application was your decision was appealed to the city council. They have chosen to hear the matter on the record, so not de novo. De novo means they'd have a whole new hearing. On the record means that they take all the information that you had at this public hearing that you held last month, and they can only make arguments, not submit new evidence. So that will be at the next city council meeting in August. And I'll provide you with an update when they make a decision.
That brings up a point. There was some comment about the planning department getting involved in letting delinquencies, giving them advance notice. And I don't think the planning department should be doing that. I don't think the billing department should be doing that either. It's up to the property owner to make sure that they're in compliance. I'm not sure how anybody else feels about it, but I don't think you should, you've got enough on your plate right now.
Mhm.
Thanks. Well, we did, I think we've been talking about just actually making a courtesy letter that would sort of go out to anyone in the third quarter if they haven't paid. And I don't think it would take an awful lot of staff time and could be at least helpful to folks, but I hear you loud and clear and I appreciate your sentiment.
They only have to have 10 days. So it can happen in any quarter. They could have a busy fourth quarter
Mhm.
without
True.
without the need of being told that they are delinquent already.
It's a very good point.
So 10 days is a lot, or is very minimal for a year.
Mhm.
I don't think we have to go more than we are doing now.
I agree.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, are there any other commissioner comments? None?
No surprise.
Okay, well then, I'm gonna adjourn this meeting.
All right.
Oh, yeah, at 8:02.